Star Wars hasn't been the same since Rise of Skywalker. In fact, it's struggling to maintain a pulse, all thanks to one man. To be fair, he already had experience with rebooting beloved space movies and showed some solid chops as a director along the way. You can't blame Disney for wanting him, especially after The Force Awakens.
We're in the money. We're in the money.
However, after the release of Rise of Skywalker and a bit of hindsight, it's clear that J.J. Abrams' ability as a director relies solely on the quality of script he's directing. From Super 8 to Star Trek, he rarely rises above that fact, which isn't an uncommon occurrence for a studio director. But after writing and directing Super 8, he wasn't seen as just another director. He was seen as the next Steven Spielberg. That is, until he wrote and directed Rise of Skywalker, a movie so creatively bankrupt, it's shocking it didn't take out alone.
For those who hate it, I could not respect your opinion more. And for those who love it, I question your sanity.
Many have said that the biggest failure of this trilogy is the lack of a concrete plan between all three, but I think that's only half true. Many films and trilogies have been fantastic without a concrete plan. Creative people are capable of incredible things when given an opportunity to be creative. Unfortunately for Disney and the sequel trilogy, only one person was smart enough to take the opportunity of what was essentially a blank slate, and it wasn't. Yes, it has its cliches and similarities to A New Hope, but it's still a solid script that any mediocre director could hold together.
Is there a big, giant, planet-sized weapon in Force Awakens? Yes. And does it blow up? It does blow up. And so there are undeniable, parallels. I very purposely wanted to sort of revisit the old.
To give him some credit, J.J. Abrams does hold it together, and then some. He clearly put his all into this film. It not only looks really great, but he also made great decisions to move the franchise back to fun practical effects and shooting with a dynamic camera on location. However, its lack of ideas and famous J.J. Abrams mystery boxes makes for a thoroughly unsatisfying film in the context of all three.
What are stories but mystery boxes?
It sets up a new mysterious evil emperor, only to have him killed in the next film.
What are stories but mystery boxes?
Rey has possession of Luke's lightsaber somehow, only for it to break in the next film.
Mystery boxes.
And Rey's parents turn out to be no one of importance in the next film.
They were nobody.
Mystery boxes.
Leading to what feels like a pissing match between one director who wanted to steer things in a different direction and another who got his feelings hurt. Yes, Ryan threw out many of J.J. Abrams'
mystery boxes,
but he did so with a purpose. He cleared the way for Kylo to succeed Snoke as the big bad. He blazed a path for Rey to become her own person, standing alone from any family lineage, and symbolically ended one story to begin another. I could be wrong, but it seems like J.J. Abrams didn't like this very much, so he got petty and decided to throw out Rian Johnson's throwing out of his mystery boxes. Within the first 5 minutes of Rise of Skywalker, it's clear J.J. Abrams wanted his trilogy back the way he left it. Within the first 5 minutes, we see Kylo looking for a thing that leads him to a place which hides a new Snoke, aka a new Palpatine. Or should I say, the old Palpatine, because
somehow Palpatine returned.
Truly shocking that within 5 minutes, J.J. Abrams spits in the eye of not only Rian Johnson for not allowing Kylo Ren to be the villain this trilogy desperately needed, but he also spits in the eye of the original trilogy by just having another Palpatine, undermining his death at the end of the 6th film. Appalling behavior just right out of the gate, completely ignoring any subtlety or artistry in favor of blunt stupidity. That ruins multiple moments across multiple films, just because he couldn't think of anything better to do. But these opening minutes are piss poor for more reasons than one. Yes, Palpatine returning is terrible, but it also handicaps Kylo Ren, a character whose arc from the previous 2 films was one of indecision. First, he was a Darth Vader fanboy. Then he broke his helmet as a symbolic gesture of his path becoming his own. And now he's just back to being a weird dark fanboy again.
Alas, you're no Vader. You're just a child. In a mask.
He reconstructed his helmet that he somehow got back after smashing in a turbo lift, went to find another Dark Lord, started doing his bidding too, and then decided he was a good boy after Leia died and Han showed up on the ruin of a somehow intact Death Star. It's a horribly rushed arc that once again felt like it undercut where the character was heading.
The Sith, the Jedi, the Rebels, let it all die.
mystery boxes.
Shortly after this, JJ pushes Rey into a generic Jedi training he set the stage for in The Force Awakens. But since he couldn't magically revive Luke, as he became one with the Force in The Last Jedi, he dug up Carrie Fisher to fill that brief role.
Everyone involved is part of a kind of magic trick of keeping Leia alive for the fans.
A subtle, if trite, shot at The Last Jedi for Luke's training being unfulfilling in that film, but you could easily chalk that up as just Jedi shenanigans. Oh, she needs to train again, whatever. The things that are truly egregious are the things that directly attack The Last Jedi. Like this. Rey once again has Luke's lightsaber. There's almost zero explanation or reasoning behind this, outside of maybe an offhand line explaining away the lightsaber literally erupting on a sinking doomed ship. What did she even do? Grab the many broken pieces of what essentially was a frag grenade that exploded on a doomed ship that was sinking, that she abandoned shortly after? And then what? Did she take tape and wrap it around the thing and call it good? If that's the case, that's horribly stupid. But if it was done with some symbolism in mind, I'd be a little bit more happy. So let's think of anything that it could mean for this movie. Unless J.J. Abrams pulls up in these comments right now, I legitimately can't think of any symbolic reason for this other than to take terrible, cheap shots at another director's work. Sure, you may think this is a small moment, but what it represents is something far more important. The symbolism of Luke's lightsaber being destroyed by Kylo and Rey was meant to be more than just a destroyed laser sword. Luke's lightsaber was a link to Luke, the Last Jedi, but also a link to the past, a symbol of what was, and by destroying it, Rey suddenly had nothing tying her to Luke or the past Jedi. She is truly her own person after that moment. Luke was the Last Jedi, and Rey began something new.
See you around, kid.
It's a big moment for a film all about becoming your own person, something that JJ continually tears away at with The Rise of Skywalker. Of course, I'd be a fool's fool if I didn't mention the controversy of revealing Rey's true parents. Disgusting, shriveled dick Emperor Palpatine.
You're his granddaughter. You are a Palpatine.
But JJ, being himself, couldn't help referencing and ultimately tying her to the fate of an evil space wizard who can conjure a million Star Destroyers with his mind. Honestly, changing who her parents are doesn't make a huge difference to the story, or it shouldn't. Her being a Palpatine in The Force Awakens doesn't really change who she is in that film or in The Last Jedi. It's just simply much less interesting, which is why J.J. Abrams frustrates me so much, because he makes these brain-dead decisions that affect nothing and mean nothing.
It's why when people like do sequels or rip off movies, of a genre, they're ripping off the wrong thing. You're not supposed to rip off the shark or the monster. You gotta rip off, if you're gonna rip something off, rip off the character.
The fallen Death Star from number 6 that is miraculously intact after vaporizing.
Rip off the character.
Luke's Force Ghost, which is taking shots at Rian Johnson again.
A Jedi's weapon deserves more respect.
Rip off the character.
Darth Vader's mask again, among other things. Of course, these are small, if annoying, references that easily could have been changed. The frustrating thing is that even the big things could have and should have been changed. Wouldn't it have been much better to have Rey be her own person?
They were nobody.
They were filthy junk traders who sold you off for drinking money.
Blazing her own unique story for her own unique character. Wouldn't it have been much better to have Kylo become his own person and be the ultimate counter to Rey? One struggling with his identity and placed behind famous people like Han and Leia, while the other attempts to make a name for herself by herself. Wouldn't it have been much better to just keep Luke's lightsaber busted and have her construct her own? I mean, she does at the end of Rise of Skywalker because J.J. Abrams wanted to tack on some last-minute symbolism where Rey has found herself, but it leads to nowhere, and it's at the very end of a trilogy.
Rey who? Rey Skywalker.
Are you serious?
Wouldn't it have been much better if this was its own film, ignoring the past and blazing its own legacy? I think we could all agree that that would have been better for this and the entire trilogy. If we all agree on that, then I think the real question we have to ask is J.J. Abrams even capable of blazing his own legacy? To start this video off, I want to address the train of thought that seems to be getting more and more popular when talking about the Disney Star Wars movies. That thought being, these movies make the infamous prequels look good by comparison. Here's the thing, if you or anyone you know has said or even thought this, you are welcome to tell them that they are wrong. Just completely wrong.
Someone to see you, honey. Jedi by the looks of him.
There is not one thing that Disney has made that is worse than those three movies. Except for maybe this.
Well, I seen a horse fly. I seen a dragon fly. I seen a house fly.
The Rise of Skywalker comes the closest to being prequel level bad, but at the very least, these Disney movies are well made. They all have slick, fast-paced camera work, stunning locations, seamless visual effects, rich sound design, and more great music from John Williams. The prequels, on the other hand, have none of those things, except for John Williams' music. These three nightmares have nothing going for them other than that. The visual effects have aged horribly and stick out like a sore thumb, especially since most of these movies are shot on green screen. The story between the three movies is also as bland as it gets. If I wanted to watch a series of political meetings, diplomatic missions, and senators needing protection from tentacle monsters, I'd watch CNN.
When Bill Clinton was president, my children came home from school and they had no idea it was actually called the Oval Office. They thought it was called the Oral Office because of the talk in the elementary schools.
I can see what George Lucas wanted to do with them, though. He wanted to have this long arc that fleshed out who Anakin was and how he became evil. But instead, he's just a punk from the start and then becomes evil because Palpatine told him a story. How complex.
It's ironic. He could save others from death, but not himself.
Is it possible to learn this power?
Not from a Jedi.
I've made a huge mistake.
I could go on and on about the stale performances, or the embarrassing dialogue, or even the flat, lifeless cinematography, but the point is, these three movies are literally some of the worst movies that have ever been made. Relative to their budget, they may be the worst movies to ever be made. Not even the glorious Duel of Fates or Battle of Heroes soundtrack pieces can make up for the amount of terrible in these movies. Which leads us back to Disney, the studio that is apparently ruining Star Wars, 15 years after it had already been put in a shallow grave. I don't think the franchise is creatively bankrupt or anything like that. The Mandalorian proves otherwise. But I, for one, am having serious Star Wars fatigue. It's all anyone seems to be yelling about anymore. Once you get away from the online discourse, you turn around and there are a million different things with the Star Wars name attached to it. It's exhausting. Now that this trilogy is over though, hopefully this marks the time to slow down on the Star Wars movies. After Solo failed spectacularly at the box office and The Last Jedi had that whirlwind of hate surrounding it, I can't imagine Disney is too eager to pump out any more movies without at least seriously considering talking it over first. When they first got the license to Star Wars, it made a lot of sense to saturate the market with Star Wars. It had been over a decade since the prequels, and the fanbase was drooling for anything Star Wars related. So Disney did what it does best and pumped out soulless product after soulless product. The first of which was The Force Awakens.
The Falcon! The Millennium Falcon! It's the Millennium Falcon! Oh my god! Oh my god! Oh god! I gotta play with my Star Wars toys! Oh god! Which ones? Oh my god!
Now, before I get into it, I do want to mention that most of this video won't be delving too deep into the plot or structure in these films, as it seems that has already been talked about to death. Unless I need to explain why something doesn't work in the story, don't expect too much talk on that. Instead, I want to talk mostly about the characters between these three movies and why they do or don't work. When I go to a movie, I want to be able to relate to or learn about a person by watching them grow or make tough choices. That's what I find most captivating about film, which is why I'm going to spend so much time on it from here on out. So without further ado, The Force Awakens.
The galaxy is counting on us. Solo, we'll figure it out.
So The Force Awakens was the first film Disney shot out in 2015, a whole decade removed from the prequels. Disney went all in on ignoring those prequels, which was a smart move. This one introduces new characters, new villains, new locations, new everything. Or so it seemed. After watching the film, it turns out it's just things we already know painted over with a shiny new coat. The New Hope parallels with this movie are extensive, and the most obvious negatives this movie has. You've got an opening action scene where a prominent rebellion character gives a droid a valuable piece of information right before being captured by the main villains. The droid escapes to a desert planet and meets our hero. The hero takes the droid in and wants to help the rebellion if they can. There's a giant planet-killing weapon, a masked villain, a trench run, the giant weapon getting blown up at the end, etc., etc. It's almost beat for beat the same movie as A New Hope. But I don't think that's all this movie does wrong. I think the bland characterization of everyone except for Kylo Ren hurts this film. Now that we know where the trilogy ends up going, it hurts it even more. The best aspect of Kylo Ren is how childish and clawing he is. His little temper tantrums are some of my favorite scenes in the film. He desperately wants to be as cool as Darth Vader, and even has a little shrine built for him. Being torn between good and evil is also quite interesting. It's too bad that that's all this character ends up being. It's nice to have a villain in these movies that is actively dealing with the pressure of good or evil that's surrounding him. It's with the rest of these so-called important characters where I take the most issue. Rey is fine, I guess, as a scavenger that has loftier ambitions. She is a blatant Luke parallel. But Daisy Ridley brings a likable charisma to the role that makes some of the Mary Sue stuff more acceptable. Yeah, it's not likely that she would hold her own in a sword fight with an experienced fighter, or fly a complicated spaceship with any success, but that stuff doesn't bother me too much, because I like her a lot. It's a little annoying, but at least she does things, and is good at things, and has some good reasons to be good at those things.
You ever fly this thing?
No!
With the added backstory of her parents ditching her, she is good enough to get her to the next movie without much more added depth. Finn, however, is simply not a good character, nor is Poe Dameron. These two have so little to do in all of these movies, it's hard to justify their existence in the first place. Finn is an ex-stormtrooper on the run, which, on its own, is a compelling idea. I like that he was a brainwashed killing machine that decided he didn't want to be that way. It's a little odd considering he was set up as being a stormtrooper from birth, because if that's all I knew was killing, I'm not sure I'd have a problem with it, but whatever. What sucks is that outside of a few stormtroopers recognizing him, this idea is completely abandoned and utterly pointless. It's barely even mentioned in the films to come. Not only is his backstory pointless, but his presence in this film is very minimal. He just kind of hangs around Rey, occasionally yelling her name.
Rey!
Finn!
Rey! Rey!
Or somehow knowing all the crucial aspects of the First Order tech despite just being a simple trooper. Aside from that, he does next to nothing. He almost abandons them at one point as well. Poe Dameron is another problem altogether. Aside from Rey, he is the most overpowered character in the entire Star Wars universe. He rarely struggles, he is untouchable in an X-Wing, and hardly seems worried about anything ever. He's set up as being an amazing pilot, but we don't see him become that. He already is when we meet him. So that potential character growth is already expended. After him and Finn crash in the desert, he promptly disappears from the movie, only returning to take out 1,000,000 guys all on his own a little bit later. Oscar Isaac gives this character a ton of personality on his own, but the writing for him is incredibly weak, and the film doesn't seem like it knows what to do with him. He puts the map in BB-8, gets captured, escapes, and disappears until he blows up 1 billion guys an hour later. You could say he's a side character, so it doesn't matter too much, but Princess Leia served the same role in A New Hope, and she becomes crucial to the story going forward. Poe Dameron just disappears until he comes back to disappear again.
You're not supposed to rip off the shark or the monster. You gotta rip off, if you rip something off,
rip off the character.
But this brings us to my least favorite characters in the film, Han and Leia. I know this will be a little bit controversial, but did they need to be here? I think not. What does Han do in this film? Run around on his ship, say what's up to Leia, go to the Death Star, and get killed. That is it. He is back to smuggling and owing people money just like in A New Hope. His character has gone nowhere and has done nothing for 30 years. The only reason he is in this film is because people will recognize him and clap. The scene where Ben kills him is nice, but that's all that works with him. Getting killed.
When you saw yourself...
No, I argued for 30 years for this to happen.
Right.
And finally, I wore him down.
Leia as well has little to no purpose in the film. She shows up, says some lines, and stares at monitors for the rest of the runtime. Why couldn't we just mention that these two were still alive and let that be enough? Why did they have to be in this movie? They take screen time away from things that actually work, like Rey or Kylo Ren. The other issues I have boil down mostly to the film just being blatantly pandering. It dredges up as much fan service as it can get away with to blind audiences with things they already know in the hopes of tricking them into also liking this. It's a tactic that almost always feels manipulative to me. This doesn't use fan service so excessively that it actively ruins the film, but it's still annoying that they do it as much as they do.
Kept it locked away.
Where'd you get that?
A good question. For another time.
Even though I've mostly been negative up until this point, I do think this movie is the most consistently good of the three. Yes, it's a clone of A New Hope, but at least you know what's going on at any given point. You understand why characters are doing the things they are doing, and the series of events plays out in a way that makes sense. It's not the most complex story, but it works. Again, Rey and Kylo Ren I also really like. When she gets captured and resists Kylo Ren's interrogation and then uses the Force to escape was a nice little sequence. It was nice to watch her discovering her powers and trying to put them to use.
You're afraid that you will never be as strong as Darth Vader.
This sword fight at the end also may be the most cinematic a lightsaber fight has ever been. I love the snowy landscape and how enraged Kylo Ren is, and how he beats his gaping wound to try and make himself more unhinged. The moment where Rey uses the Force to grab Luke's lightsaber was also quite satisfying. The point is, this movie is hit and miss. It has a lot of elements that work, but it also has a lot of easily avoidable mistakes. Dredging up past things just for the sake of it is annoying, and reskinning another film story is just so lame. If I wanted to watch A New Hope, I'll just watch A New Hope. However, since there are 2 movies after this, there is a lot that it sets up, and most of that is interesting. Snoke is suitably vague and menacing, Kylo Ren just got humiliated by Rey after killing his father, Finn got his back all chopped up, and Rey is taking her first steps in discovering who she really is. It's a solid, if unremarkable, setup for the next film.
Rey, may the Force be with you.
The Last Jedi may be the most infamous Star Wars that currently exists. This is a movie that people either call the worst Star Wars movie or the best Star Wars movie. It's one of those extraordinarily rare movies that you can't have a middle ground take on. If you don't hate it, then you have to love it. But if you love it, then you'll catch huge amounts of hate for it. Because of this film, Rian Johnson's name is forever tarnished when it comes to Star Wars, and I'm not entirely sure why. I've said multiple times that even though I don't like it, I don't mind it, yet still, people slam me just for saying that. It's remarkable to me that people can be this upset about a movie that tries to do something a little bit different. Again, it doesn't all work, but people saying that there are no redeeming qualities to this at all are crazy. There's plenty here that I think works or is at least mildly interesting. Yes, most of the positives come with some kind of negative, but that doesn't mean it's bad. It just means it's mediocre. To start, I love the direction Rian Johnson took Luke. J.J. Abrams set this movie up to simply be The Empire Strikes Back again, but Rian decided to make this a mix of a few different movies and directions, and that starts with Luke. Much like Empire, Rey goes to a remote planet in the hopes of a Jedi Master training her, but as she quickly finds out, Luke has no interest in doing so. He is completely jaded and cynical towards the Jedi, saying they don't deserve to exist anymore because of their past failures.
The legacy of the Jedi is failure. Hypocrisy, hubris.
That's not true.
At the height of their powers, they allowed Darth Sidious to rise, create the Empire, and wipe them out.
He has come to this planet not only to hide from everyone, but to hide from himself. This, in large part, has to do with what happened with Ben Solo, who Luke attempted to train. We see multiple versions of this same story, too. One where Kylo goes crazy, and one where Luke goes crazy. But the truth ends up being kind of down the middle. Luke, for a moment, loses control. Ben is understandably terrified, fights back, and leaves Luke for dead. It's an important moment in both Luke and Ben's life, and also in understanding what the film's themes are, which we'll discuss more soon.
The greatest teacher failure is.
Because of this horrible moment of failure in Luke's past, he has isolated himself from everyone. He doesn't want to be who he is anymore because of that failure. And when Rey comes looking for him, he is reminded of that failure and doesn't want to repeat it. These scenes between Rey, Luke, and Kylo Ren are by far the most compelling in the film. All three of these characters are torn on who they are because of past trauma. Kylo and Luke share the same trauma and have dealt with it in vastly different ways, one seeking solitude and exile, and the other turning the complete opposite direction and becoming evil. Meanwhile, Rey is trying to learn about her past and what waits in her future. It's in these moments where we learn the most about these characters. Kylo is still torn between becoming truly evil or returning to the light side. He has a moment early on where he could kill his mother and doesn't take it. This shows his hesitation towards truly becoming evil. Emperor Snoke tries to provoke him into it by insulting his abilities and calling him a child that hides behind a mask. Which is a great scene, by the way.
I've given everything I have to the dark side.
Take that ridiculous thing off. You were unbalanced. Bested by a girl who had never held a lightsaber. You failed!
Even though Snooki is pushing him to be evil and melding his mind with Rey's to try and turn her evil, none of it really works, and Kylo ends up killing him. Which is why Kylo is the most disappointing character in this film. He went from the best character in the last film to the most disappointing here. Just when you think he'll have a character arc and become good by killing Emperor Snoke, he just decides to be evil some more? The whole film seems to be leading up to him overcoming his horrible past with his parents and Luke to be good again, but it never happens. He is left in almost exactly the same position he started in, still torn between good and evil and running from his past. Having him and Rey team up to bring a new order to the galaxy would have been great, but nope! Rey, on the other hand, I think is right up there with Luke with how compelling her character is here. The whole movie revolves around her trying to help Kylo Ren while discovering her past and who she is. There's an amazing moment where she goes to a mirror to try and see who her parents are, but the only thing she sees is herself, which reinforces the reveal later on that her parents are nobodies and she needs to make her own way. This was one of my favorite choices in the film. Characters being related to other, more powerful characters is such a tired, lazy excuse to not write complicated characters. So having this whole movie be about her finding herself and blazing her own path is incredibly intriguing. I wish JJ stuck with her parents being no one, because I find that vastly more relatable and compelling than her parents being the offspring of Emperor Palpatine. This leads us to another controversial character, Snoke, a character so dumb and pointless that Rian Johnson just killed him off. Emperor Snoke worked as being just kind of a vague guy puppeteering behind the scenes in the first movie, but it was obvious that he was becoming an Emperor Palpatine clone, and Rian Johnson made the great decision of just killing him off. This may be the most satisfying move that this movie makes. These new movies didn't need another Palpatine, so he just killed him off. Of course, there's a conversation of subverting expectations to be had surrounding him, but as its own thing, I like it.
I cannot be betrayed.
I also think the themes of this film are the most thought-provoking of the series. The Force Awakens constantly gets reamed for not having characters fail. Here, everyone fails, and that's the whole point of the story. Everyone has horrible failures in their past that haunt them. What makes this compelling is the idea of learning from failure. Everyone fails, but learns something from it that they use to their advantage. Failing is a fundamental building block of life, and having every character failing and learning from that is very compelling. I also mentioned Rey having to cut her own path, and that's one of the other bigger themes here. Almost every character in some way is put in situations where they have to do something on their own. They have to make their own decisions. Kylo desperately wants to be like Darth Vader, but is called a loser by Snoke and will never compare to him. So he goes out to blow up his mommy to prove that he is like Vader. But his hesitation speaks more to who he is and that he actually isn't like Vader. He has his own path to follow separate from his grandpappy. Rey, on the other hand, wants to know who her parents were, so she can know who she is supposed to be. But since they were no one, that means she can be anyone she wants to be. There's also large spots of this film dedicated to the idea of moral ambiguity. Benicio del Toro's character is the exemplification of this idea. He's just a dude that wants money. He doesn't care about taking sides. He takes the job with Finn and Rose for the promise of pay, then sells them out for cash. This idea of being neutral to everything seems to come to a head when Ren offers Rey his hand. He says he wants to leave the good and bad aside and let themselves make their own way. These two themes go hand in hand nicely until the actual ending, where it's just good versus bad again. It sucks that the whole film is about the gray areas of the world, and then the ending is just as black and white as it can be. Which leads me into the other half of the film, the not-so-good stuff.
Red Claw Bloom.
The Master Codebreaker.
Those are the shuttle parkers.
Unfortunately, the rest of the characters, character relations, and ideas are far less captivating. The most obvious being Finn and Rose. Them and this casino planet are easily the most notorious parts of this movie. Everyone talks about how pointless and annoying the casino planet is, but that's not even the worst part of this subplot. At the very least, it has a message and overall purpose to it that matters to the film. Without it, we wouldn't have gotten the wonderful Benicio del Toro and all his moral ambiguity. We also wouldn't have had the First Order learning about the Rebels' plan. So at the very least, it's interwoven with the overall story, and it's always nice seeing a character in Star Wars that isn't so black and white. But back to Finn and Rose.
Now it's worth it.
These two are the worst part of the subplot. Again, Finn didn't really work for me in The Force Awakens, but here, him and his lack of character depth rear their ugly heads worse than ever. I think if he was a character you liked, this subplot wouldn't have been so dry. His character, up until this point, has come down to him being an ex-stormtrooper, and this film does little to remedy that lack of depth. He tries to go find a hacker that can disable the First Order's lightspeed tracker that has them locked in a slow-speed chase. Another element everyone hates, but more on that later. So Expendable Character 1 goes with Expendable Character 2 to this planet to find said hacker, and along the way they bring down the establishment before leaving with Del Toro. Then for some reason they have a romance unrelated to what happened on the casino planet. Not only do they have absolutely no on-screen chemistry, but you simply don't like either one of them enough to care about this romance. So why have it? It's so frustrating to have a character like Finn with such an interesting backstory, and to watch not one thing be done with it. But Rose is even more infuriating. Not only does she do very little of interest, but she doesn't even have a good backstory like Finn does. She's just sisters with someone that did something cool. That's it. Oh, but she stuck it to the man and let those horse things loose on a city of unsuspecting people, so that makes me like her, I guess.
That's how we're gonna win. Not fighting what we hate. Saving what we love.
Speaking of awful characters, Laura Dern's Holdo takes the cake as everyone's least favorite character, and for good reason. She takes over for Leia after Leia flies around in space and quickly proceeds to withhold valuable information from her crew. Why not tell Poe, the reckless pilot that is known to do stupid things, your plan to secretly take ships and hide on a salt planet? What would you have lost in doing that? If you had done that, then Del Toro wouldn't have been in the movie, which means the First Order wouldn't have known your plan. If you had done that, there would have been no mutiny, there would be no Del Toro, and there would be no need to sacrifice yourself. You could have casually cruised over to the planet with little to no hiccups. But I guess a movie has to happen, right, Miss Plot Device?
Tell us that we have a plan, that there's hope.
When I served under Leia, she would say, hope is like the sun. If you only believe in it when you can see it.
You'll never make it through the night.
It's baffling that the script was written with this large of a logical inconsistency. Now for the piece de resistance, otherwise known as the ending action scene. This last 30 minutes simply and utterly ruins a lot of what this movie built up. Not only is this a climax after a climax just happened, but it throws the themes of being morally gray out the window with good and evil just fighting again. It's frustrating that the entire film is all about characters finding their own way in the world that isn't as black and white as it seems, only to have it end with exactly what the film seems to be against. I think it would have been great if it ended with the rebels fleeing to the salt planet and cutting to black when Kylo reached out for Rey. You'd have somewhere to go from here and have a legitimate cliffhanger. But no. Instead, we get a massive battle between good and evil where Rose almost gets herself killed trying to stop Finn from doing something interesting for a change. It's quite the disappointing conclusion to an otherwise compelling and different Star Wars. There's a lot of great elements and themes at play that feel squashed by this ending. I know earlier I said I wasn't going to focus too much on the plots of these films and instead discuss the characters. Unfortunately for me and this film, the characters have never been more uninteresting than they are here. There is so little that happens in terms of character growth that, aside from a scene or two, I'm just not going to talk about them. They are seriously no better than plot devices for 95% of this nearly 2.5 hour feature. With that out of the way, though, let's get into Rise of Skywalker.
You ever gonna go?
Unfortunately for Rian Johnson, his movie is now almost completely useless to this trilogy. Every choice, every decision he made is effectively gone. Again, I don't love The Last Jedi, but it feels pretty counterintuitive to take the middle chapter of a trilogy and throw it in the garbage. I know a lot of people criticize The Last Jedi for undoing a lot of J.J. Abrams' mystery boxes, like Rey's parents or Snoke, but I honestly don't think he did. He built and expanded on them in a way that was actually satisfying and made sense in the context of his story. His ideas obviously don't always work, but he took a lot of what The Force Awakens had and built on it. Rise of Skywalker, on the other hand, outright undoes a lot of The Last Jedi in completely unearned, unsatisfying ways, Rey's parents being the most prominent of those. It's revealed that her parents are nobody, but it's her grandpa that is in fact somebody. That somebody being Emperor Palpatine. This was simply and honestly the worst, most disastrous choice that this film could have possibly made. But we'll get more into that soon. In the meantime, let's set the stage. J.J. Abrams immediately made the horrible decision to cram an entire movie into the first 30 minutes. It is pretty clear that given the opportunity, he would have made the middle chapter of this trilogy Empire and this one Return of the Jedi, because this is largely just Return of the Jedi, even though there were already elements of Return of the Jedi in The Last Jedi, like the throne room scene with Snoke, Rey seeing the rebels blow up, and Kylo Ren killing Palpatine, Snoke.
Snoke trained you well.
I killed Snoke. I'll kill you.
The first 30 minutes of Rise of Skywalker are possibly the most ADHD thing I've seen in a while. We open with Kylo Ren just somewhere, never says where, but he's killing some folks to find a thing. This never-before-seen or mentioned device points him in the direction of a secret bad guy planet that has also never been mentioned until now. He rushes over there and discovers Palpatine is still alive, just chilling in the depths of hell with a bunch of cloaked monkeys. He shows Kylo a new fleet of Star Destroyers that he conjured out of nowhere and says that they'll be his if he kills Rey.
It will be yours if you do as I ask. Kill the girl.
I have so many questions regarding this nonsense. My first question being, how did Palpatine conjure 1 million spaceships with people that work on them from nothing? This, like another Force power introduced later on, is just a cheap, lazy way of writing themselves out of a hole. If Palpatine could conjure entire battleships from nothing, why not conjure up something more useful? Why not conjure up 1 million Death Stars instead? Why not conjure up a new body for himself? Why not conjure a laser the size of a solar system that destroys galaxies? If this film has told me anything, it's that J.J. Abrams is adept at pulling nonsense from his butt cheek and that he doesn't care if it makes sense or works in the slightest.
They had only a handful of scripts and they were printed on crazy uncopyable paper, and it was, and then one of our actors, and I'm not going to say which one, I want to, but I won't, left it under their bed, and it was found by someone who was cleaning their place. And it was given to someone else who then went to sell it on eBay.
Endless trash!
Then we see Poe and Finn meeting with Mark Hamill, who sends a message to Leia saying that there's a spy in the First Order. TIE fighters come out of literally nowhere to fight them, and then they end up back at the Rebel base where Rey is being trained again. I don't know where this Rebel base is, but it's somewhere.
I will earn your brother's saber. One day.
Luke's lightsaber, the lightsaber that was completely destroyed in the last film, is just fine now. They put some tape on it, so it works. Don't think about it. Destroying Luke's lightsaber served as symbolism in The Last Jedi. It represented the past for both of these characters being left behind. It represented something greater and actually matters to the story. What point does repairing the lightsaber here serve? Nothing beyond taking cheap jabs at The Last Jedi. After this, they look in one of the Sacred Jedi textbooks where apparently Luke has scribbled some nonsense about finding the bad guy compass. Pretty convenient for these characters that even though it's never mentioned, Luke at some point just haphazardly wrote in one of the Jedi's sacred Bibles where to possibly find an evil compass. We're not even 20 minutes in, and so much has happened, I'm convinced you could fill an entire movie with just this stuff and have the cliffhanger being them finding out about the Wayfinder and Palpatine.
I'm gonna pick up Luke's search for Exegol. I'm gonna start where his trail went cold. The Forbidden Desert of Pisana.
Now, pacing is very difficult to nail down, to be fair. You have to stretch out or compact your story, plot points, and character growth in just the right way for the film to flow right. If you stretch material too far, then the film will feel boring or meandering. If you rush through things too quickly, then you won't get a clear picture of who anyone is or what anything means. and this film absolutely rushes its story. Yes, it's 2.5 hours, but there is far too much going on to keep track of, especially in this first act. You've got this plot of Kylo Ren trying to find Palpatine that gets resolved in less than 5 minutes. Then you've got this plot of the rebels finding out about a mole in the First Order that also gets resolved in the first 5 minutes. Then you've got this plot of Rey training with Leia and getting pissy about the training course. There's literally 3 different plots going on in the first 10 minutes, and it's simply too much. You don't get a sense of where anything or anyone is. It blasts through it so quickly, I'm not sure why they couldn't just write this out in the opening crawl. Would it have been so hard to do that? Or just make this your whole movie? But instead, we have a whole other movie that starts after this. This scene in Lightning Hell is where the film takes its first shot at The Last Jedi, by repairing Kylo Ren's helmet. Remember that great moment where Snoke makes fun of him for being a Vader tryhard? Well, now the impact of him destroying his helmet and trying to be his own man is completely gone and undercut. They repair his helmet and he immediately shifts all the way back to exactly who he was in The Force Awakens. Bad guy in a helmet that wanks to Darth Vader. It's almost like JJ missed the entire point that destroying his helmet represented. It was to symbolize a change in Kylo Ren as a character. There is absolutely no greater point or symbolism to repairing his helmet here beyond taking cheap shots at Rian Johnson. Also, I can't breeze by this line from Mary Brandybuck without talking about it.
It cannot be. The Emperor is dead.
Dark science. Cloning. Secrets only the Sith knew.
Bringing back Palpatine is one of the worst decisions made in any Star Wars movie. Yeah, I get that cloning has been a thing in Star Wars before this, but it completely and totally undercuts Anakin's arc of bringing balance to the Force in the other 6 movies. Remember the whole prophecy about him in the prequels? Now that doesn't mean anything, because he doesn't really bring balance to the Force. Every time I watch him kill Palpatine from now on, I'll just go, oh wait, there's a Palpatine clone on some indistinct evil planet in a lightning dungeon. There are 6 movies showing Anakin turn from good to evil and then redeeming himself by killing the ultimate evil. Now all that's out the window. Thanks, JJ.
I think the most surprising thing, for me was the
Then the film takes its 3rd shot at The Last Jedi with Finn and Rose having a moment, where even though Finn and Rose loved each other earlier in this timeline, now they don't for no reason at all. I mean, am I fine they aren't a thing? Yes, because I didn't like them in the first place. But am I salty that there is no explanation or reasoning behind them not being a thing? Yes, very much so.
I need to go alone.
Yeah, along with friends.
It's too dangerous, Finn.
We go together.
I wholeheartedly agree.
So Rey, Poe, Finn, and C-3PO all go out to follow Luke's plot devices, clues. Speaking of lazy plot devices, here's Lando Calrissian, a character that has seldom been mentioned in any of these movies, but he just so happens to be in the exact place at the exact time as the main characters, so that he can tell them about a ship that crashed in the desert that may or may not have a clue to the bad guy compass. This is another perfect example of the film's endless plot devices. It's absolutely ludicrous how often this film resorts to convenience or devices to artificially drive the story forward. The story is rarely pushed forward by characters making choices based on something and acting based on that something. Instead, JJ just makes something up from thin air and uses it to push the characters where he wants them to go. Which is why I said at the beginning that these characters are the least interesting they've ever been. Even The Force Awakens realized that characters making choices that push the story forward was the right way to go. Here, JJ has gone full-on who cares mode and is slapping the story together in whatever willy-nilly way he feels like. If characters or objects are constantly popping out of thin air to direct our characters to their next location, then there is nothing to latch onto as a viewer. There's nothing to root for or care about because you know the script is going to do whatever it wants regardless.
Look at that.
Where is she?
Anyway, they find the ship with little difficulty, but end up falling into the one patch of quicksand on the entire planet. Seriously, they've been driving all over the place, and this is the only spot I've seen with this dark-colored quicksand. Why would that be, you ask? Well, because it's a plot device for our characters to be led exactly where they need to be. They fall into these tunnels where they find the dagger they need that happens to have the coordinates written on it in Sith, pointing them to the baddie compass location. But you guessed it, we get met with another plot device in the form of C-3PO being inexplicably unable to translate the writing.
20.3 Fazillion languages, you can't read that?
Oh, I have read it, sir. I know exactly where the Wayfinder is. Unfortunately, it is written in the runic language of the Sith.
So what?
My programming forbids me from translating it.
He knows exactly what it says, but Sith is apparently a language that young Anakin programmed him to not be able to say when he built him 100 years ago? Are you serious? So this sets off a whole other series of events where they need to find a way to get him to translate it. Then Chewie gets captured, and even though Finn could clearly see 2 transports in this shot, he reacts to the transport being exploded as if it was the only one. But he could clearly see these 2, right? Oh, don't think about it? Oh, okay then.
Right! They got Chewie! They got him!
They then go to the ship that's been abandoned for decades that magically still runs fine. They take the ship and head to a planet where they can hack into C-3PO's brain that Poe has apparently been before. He has a whole history here of smuggling with Carrie Russell, who hates him for abandoning her. Then we're introduced to the best character in the movie, Babu Frick, who is doing his thing with C-3PO while we get 2 plot devices in one scene. Carrie Russell apparently has a First Order Captain's Medallion, somehow, that will allow access to any ship in the First Order fleet. Somehow. This medallion is never mentioned before or after they board Kylo Ren's ship and exists solely to get the characters on said ship. I'm not kidding when I say that this movie may have the most plot holes, lapses in logic, and plot conveniences I've ever seen a script have. Even the prequels, which are far worse, have more ideas than this. This film literally invented whatever it wanted for the sake of their sloppy writing and because they wanted to just clone Return of the Jedi. It's bewildering that the film has taken this many liberties and we aren't even halfway through. Speaking of liberties, this film, like the last one, introduces a new Force power, that being the power of Force Heal. We see Rey use this a number of times throughout the film. This power has a lot of people up in arms. And honestly, I don't hate it. I think it's a fine addition to the Force ability skill tree. The problem with it, though, is that the film doesn't put restrictions or rules to it. It's used to heal minor wounds, major wounds, and even bring people back from the dead, which removes any and all stakes that this film could have had. If you introduce an ability that keeps people from death, then how can I fear for these characters? This is the same problem Kingsman 2 had with its brain jelly. Colin Firth got shot in the face in the first movie in an unexpected and satisfying scene that was completely gouged by him being resurrected in the second one. It's the same here. Now, any death in any of these Star Wars movies is undermined by this choice. Now, I still don't hate the idea, but having it being unlimitedly powerful cripples the film's attempt at emotion. Why not say you can only heal minor wounds, but not major ones? If you simply apply rules or logic to this, it completely falls apart. It's mystifying that JJ, a highly paid Hollywood writer-director, couldn't be bothered to think about this crucial story element.
I just transferred a bit of life. Force energy from me to him. You would have done the same.
Nah, bitch, I'm cool.
So, The Last Jedi had Rey and Kylo Ren talking to each other and even touching hands from afar. But wasn't this because Snoke melded their minds together?
Young fool. It was I who bridged your minds. I stoked Ren's conflicted soul. I knew he was not strong enough to hide it from you.
Wasn't that the reason that they could talk to each other from across the galaxy? There's also this shot symbolizing their bond together being cut off, but their bond is back again? Why? so they can have this fight scene where sand spills from one location to another, but then is just gone in the next cut? In The Last Jedi, it seemed like only minor things translated through their conversations, like the feel of the other's hand or the spray of the water. But here, objects teleport to different locations miles away just because? I sincerely don't understand how this works, and of course the film doesn't explain it. I mean, it can't even be bothered to explain what Finn was gonna say to Rey!
Rey, I never told you Rey!
So what was it?
What?
What you were going to tell me?
When?
When you were sinking in the sand, you said, I never told you.
I'll tell you later.
You mean when Poe's not here?
Yeah? Mm-hmm.
We're gonna die in sand burrows and we're all keeping secrets?
What were you gonna tell Rey before?
You still on that?
Oh, I'm sorry, is this a bad time?
It sort of is a bad time, Poe.
It's later, but it's more than enough. If you're gonna let something off your chest, maybe now's not the worst time.
There is way too much this film leaves unexplained that it almost becomes unwatchable. You barely know what's going on, and when you do, it's only because some plot device cropped up to point our characters to their next destination. Also, in this sequence on Kylo Ren's Star Destroyer, we find out that General Hux was the spy in the First Order. Then, only a few scenes later, he gets killed. What a waste of a character. He stands around and is angry at Kylo Ren for 3 movies and then just dies for no reason. He says he was a spy just because he didn't want to see Kylo Ren lose.
Why are you helping us? I don't care if you win. I need Kylo Ren to lose.
He says he was the spy just because he wanted to see Kylo Ren lose. But why would he do that? Clearly this new guy has taken his place as second in charge behind Kylo Ren, so why would Hux only be trying to backstab Kylo Ren? Wouldn't he have to backstab both these guys to gain power? For all 3 of these movies, he's been pretty loyal to the First Order as well. Why would this Hitler wannabe give the rebellion anything that could be used to stop him? I think it would have made way more sense to have this new guy be the mole. Of course, that may have been mildly obvious because he hasn't been seen up until now, but because he's friends with Palpatine, that would give him a reason for wanting Kylo Ren out so that Palpatine could gain full control of the Order. Also, the only info that is delivered to the rebels is about Kylo Ren hunting down Palpatine.
We've decoded the intel from the First Order spy, and it confirms the worst. Somehow Palpatine returned.
And I don't get why either. If General Hux, being the spy, really wanted to take down Kylo Ren, wouldn't he give the rebels the means to do that instead of just alerting them to Palpatine's existence? But now they know the location of the evil compass, and they head to the wreckage of the second Death Star to get it. Even though it was incinerated in Return of the Jedi, there's still a good amount left chilling in the ocean of this undisclosed planet that isn't Endor, even though the Death Star in Return of the Jedi was orbiting above the Ewok planet of Endor. It somehow managed to land on a different planet?
Wayfinder's there.
Logic aside, Rey bum rushes her way into the Death Star and is confronted by her evil self because that's the version of her that followed in Palpatine's footsteps. But who cares? Then Kylo Ren shows up out of thin air, which is more bothersome to me than her fighting herself. Because even though Rey had to traverse sketchy waters and use the one and only dagger with the coordinates to the spot that she needs to go, Kylo somehow knows exactly where she is? There is no way he would know where she is on this gigantic Death Star, and yet he parks his TIE fighter perfectly on the wreckage in the middle of the ocean and finds her instantly. Wouldn't it have made more sense for him to take his knights and go capture Poe and company to use as leverage? You would think that since they couldn't possibly have known where she was, this plan of action would have made way more sense. Have the Knights of Ren capture Poe and company and then say that Rey has to come with them or Kylo Ren will kill them. And that also would have given the Knights of Ren something to do, because throughout the whole movie, they do literally nothing. All they do is stand around corners and then have the camera pan over to show them, and then get killed by Kylo Ren at the end. They just do nothing at all. Why have them? But no, instead of common sense, we have this lame fight scene where Rey attempts to murder him right after Leia dies from whispering his name. She says Ben, and then just falls over. What a lame way to kill off Carrie Fisher's character. Too bad no Force users were around, or they could have just healed her. So Leia dies, and even though Rey stabbed Kylo, she just heals him, and then runs off with his ship, ditching him on the destroyed Death Star in the middle of the ocean. How's he gonna get off that thing? Poe and Finn aren't gonna help him, because they don't like him. He is seriously stuck there for... oh, wait. I guess there just so happened to be one perfectly functional TIE fighter in the wreckage of a 30-year-old war machine. Just don't think about it, I guess.
Son is dead.
No.
Kylo Ren is dead.
Then we get one of the very few character moments in this ADHD nightmare of a film, where Han Solo shows up to talk to Ben. He isn't a Force ghost, though, so I'm very confused how Han is there at all. But anyway, he says Kylo Ren is dead and Ben is alive, which drives Kylo into being a good guy. For absolutely no reason other than that his daddy said so.
Kylo Ren is dead.
The thing with character arcs is that you need them to make sense. You need to have logical points of interest that drives your character into making change. Kylo Ren turning good in the last movie would have made way more sense than it does here. He does nothing but bad things throughout this entire film. But because his mommy said his name and his daddy materialized from thin air, he's a good guy now. There's no driving force behind it. He's just good because. If his mommy didn't say his name, I'm convinced that Han wouldn't have showed up, and he would still have tried to turn Rey evil. Also, I think it's hysterical that when he shows up later, he's just in, like, street clothes. They wanted him to be good, so they had him take off his bad guy suit and show up in his just regular clothes. It makes me laugh.
What are you doing?
I saw myself on the Dark Throne. I won't let it happen. I'm never leaving this place. I'm doing what you did.
I was wrong.
Directly after this is when the film just decides Rey should have her arc too. She goes back to Luke's hideaway to run away from herself like Luke did. She is scared of being evil because Palpatine was evil, and she doesn't want to be tied to his fate. Which, to be fair, is mildly compelling until Luke shows up. They chat for 5 seconds and then she just decides to not be evil. How lazy can you get? Not only does this arc come out of nowhere and feels completely unearned and rushed, but it's literally the same arc Luke has in The Return of the Jedi. In that, Luke has to deal with Vader being his dad, and he has to decide who he wants to be. This was an idea set up a movie earlier, not at the last second in this movie. When Luke confronts Vader and the Emperor, he chooses to do the right thing and not kill his dad. You know, like a character arc. But Rey and Kylo are just told that they should be good, so then they are. They didn't let their bloodlines dictate who they were, which is a hackneyed, rushed theme that the film throws onto this dumpster fire at the last second, and it wraps it up in just a few scenes. Kylo is evil the whole movie until he isn't. Rey is good the whole movie until she decides she still is. What vapid, hollow development.
She told me that she had sensed the death of her son at the end of her Jedi path. She surrendered her saber to me and said that
But the movie isn't over yet. In fact, we're just getting started with the terrible that this has to offer. We finally made it to the conclusion. Or should I say, we've made it to Return of the Jedi. Again. It's literally just Return of the Jedi all over again. It's the same type of characters doing the same type of things, but much, much worse. You've got Rey, the Luke equivalent, Ben Solo, the Vader equivalent, and Emperor Palpatine, the Emperor Palpatine equivalent. You've also got the boring side characters doing a thing away from Palpatine. Also, like in Return of the Jedi, Palpatine wants Rey to strike someone down to complete their turn to the dark side. But here, I guess, if she kills Palpatine, then he will possess her as well?
You want to kill me? That is what I want. Kill me, and my spirit will pass into you.
Maybe JJ is forgetting, but the thing that made the ending in Return of the Jedi satisfying was that the character arcs happen in this scene, not the scene right before this. When Luke chooses not to kill Vader, and Vader chooses to help Luke, is great! But in Rise of Skywalker, the characters have already made their decisions, so there's no tension or stakes. We know exactly what choices the characters are going to make already, and they do exactly what you think they would given the arcs they just had. So of course, Rey doesn't strike down Palpatine, but she does later on in the same scene. So I guess he won't possess you if you melt his skin off? I don't understand how that works, but whatever, don't think about it because Rey is dead somehow. How did she die? Seriously, she melted Palpatine's skin off with his own lightning, so how did she also die? This makes no sense. But luckily, Ben Solo has the ability of Force Resurrection, and he revives her so they can kiss right before he dies, for no reason. He falls over and is dead now. But luckily, Rey also has the power of Force Resurrect and can... Oh, wait. He disappears for no reason. Pretty lucky, I guess, that Rey didn't disappear earlier so that she could be revived. And Ben did, so he couldn't. Then we get this embarrassing scene back on Tatooine where Luke used to live and Rey buries his lightsaber, even though there's no way she could have known where he lived. And then she says that she is a Skywalker for no good reason. And then that's the end of the Rise of Skywalker.
Rey Skywalker.
This ending may be the most embarrassing ending to any Star Wars movie that exists. Not only is it actively ripping off a better movie, but any changes it makes are for the worse. Even after watching this multiple times, I still don't fully understand why anything happens. Why did Rey die? Why did Kylo Ren disappear and Rey didn't? Why did Rey killing Palpatine not transfer him into her like he said it would? Why was the whole star battle necessary? How was Palpatine able to shoot Force lightning in the sky like that? If he could do that, why didn't he do it in any other movie? Why did that lightning only disable the Rebel ships and not the Empire ships as well? How did Kylo Ren find a flyable ship on the destroyed Death Star? If you couldn't navigate to the bad guy planet without the bad guy compass, how does Kylo Ren get there? How was Rey able to teleport a lightsaber? Why do the Knights of Ren carry medieval weapons and not blasters or lightsabers? Who are all these people chanting? Why did one lightsaber not reflect lightning, but two does? Why didn't Palpatine throw Rey into this hole like he did with Kylo Ren? I could go on, but I think you get the point. This movie is a total dumpster fire. Not one story or character element works in the least. All of it feels cheap and trite in some way, and even though the film moves at 100 miles an hour, it still manages to be boring. It's unbelievable that a film with so much money and talent behind it failed so miserably. You've got some of the best visual effects artists, set designers, sound mixers, camera operators, and music composers in the world, and it still turned out to be hot garbage. None of these characters are likable here, and the movie not having a cohesive narrative hurts it significantly for me. You can make a movie with $10, and if the characters are likable and the story is interesting, then I won't care so much about how it looks or sounds. That's really what it comes down to. The movie looks great, but it feels lifeless, hollow, devoid of personality and character. Take your mystery box crap out of here, JJ.
Rip off the character, rip off the stuff that matters. I mean,
you can say what you want about the Force Awakens Mary Sue characters or The Last Jedi structure, but at least they have things that work. At least they have things I can easily point to that are memorable or even likable. Rise of Skywalker doesn't. It's odd that these three movies, with so much at stake, were so underdeveloped. Disney spent $4 billion on this license, and all they've done with it is shout out bland trash. It's obvious there was no plan for this trilogy going in, which is why there's hardly any consistency between the three. On one hand, not having a plan is very creatively freeing, but on the other, it leaves too much open for failure. That said, I don't think having a detailed, elaborate plan would work either. I mean, George Lucas had no idea where Star Wars was going to go after A New Hope. He just made a movie inspired by things that he liked at the time. There was no plan going forward. But since he and his team allowed themselves to take time in between the other movies to figure out what they wanted to do, they were able to have ideas that worked. There was logical consistency, plots and characters weren't tossed out for no reason, and you were actually invested in what was happening. If there was a budding romance, they followed it to its logical end. If there was a character with turmoil, they followed that until its logical end. They didn't just pick and choose what they liked and what they didn't like from the other movies. They picked what worked and expanded on it, and then they took what didn't work and fleshed it out to make it work. Maybe after the failure of these three movies, Disney will get a clue and make something that is well thought out and compelling. Who knows? Maybe they won't make another movie for a while and will focus more on TV, where they can give people more creative freedom and have less stakes attached. All I can really say is that it's thoroughly disappointing how mediocre this trilogy ended up being. So The Rise of Skywalker is directed by J.J. Abrams and written by J.J. Abrams, as well as the guy behind the masterpiece known as Batman vs. Superman, one of the most critically hated movies of the decade. And these two have teamed up to write the final Star Wars movie in the Star Wars saga. And it is so bad, I can't even comprehend it. After coming out of the movie, I was ecstatic at how terrible it was. I don't know why, but I could not stop laughing. The movie is dreadful. So The Last Jedi is sort of universally known as one of the worst Star Wars movies, but it's one that I also didn't mind that much. While it definitely has some serious, crippling issues to it, there is a lot in it to like. It's 2.5 hours, so of course it's packed with things, and a lot of it works, I think, more than doesn't. Rey is interesting, Luke is interesting, Poe Dameron has an arc. I mean, every character has an arc, the story has a purpose, and it kind of works. It kind of hobbles to a conclusion. It's not completely limp and dead, but it's hobbled. It's not great, but this movie, of course, everyone knew this was coming, kind of reverses a lot of what The Last Jedi does.
Wow, it must be really strong with you.
Never found any.
For the first half of the movie, it seems to just be saying, forget about what happened in The Last Jedi. It's not true. Like the lightsaber that got exploded in The Last Jedi. She has it again. Why not? General Snoke got cut in half. Who cares? Because Palpatine's in this movie now. It seems like this movie is desperately trying to reverse a lot of what happened in The Last Jedi, especially since at the end of that movie, there's like 15 Resistance guys left, and the First Order is just hunting them down. And then in this movie, they're just like on some planet, some nondescript planet. They're just there with like 100 people now. And the point of that, the Last Jedi, is that you forge your own path. But in this movie, the whole point is teamwork. You teamwork. We win the day with teamwork. So this movie tries so hard to reverse the Last Jedi, to not do what the Last Jedi did, but then it simultaneously doesn't do anything interesting. And that starts with the characters, which leads into point number 2. The characters in this movie suck. They're completely uninteresting. There's absolutely nothing about these characters in this movie that works. Not one thing. I mean, again, in The Last Jedi, you know, you have Kylo Ren and Rey who are kind of going back and forth with each other, trying to figure out where their allegiance lies. There's a lot of turmoil. Luke is kind of cynical and jaded towards the Jedi, and his arc is that he comes to help at the end, and he finds out that he's the Jedi, and he's a good guy again. The characters have arcs. Characters are interesting. And then in this movie, none of that happens. There's no character arcs in this movie. Kylo Ren goes from evil McBad to good guy for no reason. There's no logical reason why he does. He just does, because Han Solo shows up in an embarrassing scene. And then Rey's character arc is that she finds out she's a Palpatine, which is the dumbest thing that they could have possibly done. And even though she thinks she's evil, she decides that she's not, which is the same arc she had in the last movie. It's just the same arc again. Completely uninteresting. Finn's arc in this movie? Nothing. He's barely in it. Poe's arc in this movie? Oh, nothing. He's barely in it. Remember the love story between Finn and Rose? Oh, it doesn't exist anymore. Rose is barely in the movie. Remember how Finn or Poe learned that following authority is something that he should do? Oh, well, he's just a general now, so forget that. It's just the most bland characters you can imagine. For the first half of it especially, there's nothing interesting that they do. Bad McBad is bad McBad. Good McGood is good McGood, and they have little sidekicks. And that's it. There's no, they don't do anything. They don't do anything. The characters have no sway on the movie, it seems. Anything that they do, it seems to be forced upon them by this hackneyed script, which is a perfect segue into point 3. The script is dreadful. The script is so bad. I can't believe this script got okayed. Now, the script for Last Jedi wasn't great, obviously, but this movie has no structure. Absolutely no structure to it whatsoever. For the first half, everything that happens is the same over and over and over again. Rey is looking for a bad guy compass. That's the MacGuffin of the movie for the first half, is a bad guy compass. And she goes down to this desert planet for who knows what reason. They don't say. They just go to it because why not? And then Lando's there because why not? And then there's a ship there because why not? This movie is why not the movie. Everywhere they go, the things just happen for no reason because the movie says that they should happen. Everywhere they go, things happen, they know people somehow magically, and all the people, despite them liking them or not, help them for no reason. And then there's a lot of times when the camera is pushing in on them slowly, and then it turns, and the bad guys are right behind them. Every single time. Like, that's the first half of the movie, is they go to a place, and the bad guys follow them, and then they run to a new place, and the bad guys follow them, and they run to a new place, and the bad guys follow them. It's like Rogue One planet hopping. It's just nonsense. There is nothing driving characters to certain points and or driving what they do. The characters just go wherever the script needs them to go and do whatever the script needs them to do because it's a movie. So who cares about logic? But the last half of this movie gets even worse, if that's possible. The last half of this movie is the most embarrassing cinema I think I've sat through this year, because after they do this game of cat and mouse, going to different planets and whatnot, Rey finally gets the bad guy compass, and then Kylo Ren is there, of course, because they're right there at all times, no matter what, and so he crushes it and forces her to come with him, or at least that's what he thinks he's doing. But then she kills him, but then she doesn't, because she has the power of Force Heal, because that's a thing now, Force heal. She also has the power of Force dig, which is pretty stupid, but whatever.
We can take these beats, which are basically the beats of your outline, and if the words "and then" belong between those beats, you're f***ed.
And so she ditches him there after almost killing him, and then Han Solo comes to him, and he decides that he's a good guy for no reason. And then Rey goes to the Sith bad guy planet where Palpatine is, who is inexplicably alive. No rhyme or reason there. He just is because.
No one's ever really gone.
The Emperor wants her to kill him so that he can transfer into her somehow. But then Kylo Ren shows up. Doesn't show you how. It just shows a little ship there. I mean, I don't know. He just got there. Why not? That's the movie. Why not? He gets there, and then they together kill a bunch of bad guys, and then Emperor Palpatine sucks their life force out and becomes Emperor Palpatine again. Because why not? And then Rey kills Emperor Palpatine again, and then Kylo Ren transfers his life into her because she died somehow. It doesn't explain how. She just kind of falls over and is dead. And then he disappears into the Force, and she comes back alive. And that's the end of the movie. It's so awful. It's the dumbest thing. It is the dumbest thing I've ever seen. But the nostalgia in this movie, the nostalgia baiting, is single-handedly the worst. It's just the worst. This movie just cannot help itself. It just dredges up as many things as it possibly can that the audience knows for no reason. It just does because. Lando is in this movie. Why? Why not? Because. Oh, Palpatine's in this movie, even though he exploded. Why? Oh, why not? Because. Oh, the Millennium Falcon's still in the movie. Why not? Because. Oh, Princess Leia's in this movie. Why not? Because. Han Solo makes an appearance. Why not? Because. I mean, every bit of this movie is why not? Or just because. There's no reason to anything that happens. C-3PO is on the mission with them throughout the first half of the movie. Why not? Just because. And he finds a little dagger that has Sith writing on it, and only he can read it, but he can't say what it says. Why not? Just because. Or R2-D2's in this movie again. Why not? I mean, there is so much that this movie is just hoping to blind audiences with. It's like, oh, let's just throw as much crap on the screen as audiences remember, and hopefully they will just forget about the embarrassing structure and story that we've cobbled together out of nothing. The nostalgia baiting is not just embarrassing, but it is so see-through. I mean, Force Awakens has a lot of nostalgia baiting. It has a lot of fan service in it. But at least it was at the service of a story. The Force Awakens tells a story. Yeah, it's a ripoff of A New Hope, but it's still a story with a structure, with things that happen. This movie has nostalgia just painted over the screen in place of a story. Star Destroyers! I'm gonna come! Everything it does is dreadful. The only redeeming qualities are the look and the music. That's it. It looks nice. The performances are fine. The music's great. That's it. That's all that it does right. That's all that it can do. Everything else is just like, what fan service can we get? The structure makes no sense. Who cares? Rey is a Palpatine. Why? I don't know. Who cares? 3 out of 10. Honestly, I would say don't see this, but it's such a hilarious failure that you might as well.